get kicked down this time because my brother called the cops on me this weekend.
Really? Okay,
Oh.
let's
Story time.
Let's start with
Yeah,
Patsy's
well-
story in a second. Well, because
I
Matthew.
have to check in with him. I have to check in with him like every other day, otherwise he starts to get worried about me. And I forgot to text him and say, yeah, hi, I'm still alive, I haven't done anything stupid. And so he called the cops, can you just do a wellness check? And luckily I was awake and I could let them in, otherwise they would have kicked the door down.
Oh, bloody hell. And who assigned this guy? Is this guy to be your keeper / chaperone / whatever have you? I mean, I understand.
Yeah, he is my legal next of kin. I mean, my mother doesn't want anything to do with it, so, he's the one in charge.
Yeah.
Swell.
Still, it's never nice to have cops beating on your door.
No, I mean, at first it was like, okay, what did I do? I don't remember killing anyone.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what it was, but it wasn't me.
Exactly.
Some weekends are crazy, though. You got to double check.
Oh, yeah.
right.
I've had weekends like that.
Did I kill somebody? I don't think I did.
I think you remember that.
Yeah. I think I maybe I did kill somebody.
Remember that.
Speak for yourself, Lauren.
Yeah, right. Well, before we went on the air, for anybody watching, Matthew had just recounted this charming story of how they're going to have to replace all the pipes in Montgomery County because they added something to the water that corrodes copper pipes, and he got his door knocked down by the fire department. So it's get your door knocked down by the local authorities week, apparently. But I guess I should keep my head on a swivel because if there's a knock on the door, I guess I better answer it.
Yeah,
you gotta be careful. Audie might call you in.
Yeah, right.
Although, how good is your front door, Steve?
It's not very good. They could probably batter their way through. I mean, it's a nice heavy door, but I wouldn't want to vouch for, if the fire department is outside with a battering ram.
Well, no. Well, one thing I've always heard, and it was confirmed yesterday, is that even if you have a terrible door, always have a good lock on it because it'll show signs of forced entry. If it's a bad lock, they can probably pick it or something else, and you will never know. So here's the testimony for Schlage locks because they fucking work. They're expensive, but they work. Because the fire department with all their tools couldn't break the lock off the door. Now they tried really hard. I can tell they tried to turn the entire cylinder and everything else, but they couldn't break it off the door.
Wow.
And therefore that was why they just, had to, ram it and bust open the frame and everything. So I need a new door and a new frame now.
Wow.
It's probably the only time you can have a good review being like, yeah, because of this lock, they had to break my door in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you need to do, Matthew. You need to contact Schlage Locks and give a testimonial.
Yeah,
Maybe you make back the cost of the door with that.
I mean, I
guarantee you, the next door is going to have a Schlage lock on it. That's for sure.
Damn Skippy.
Was it? I guess it was an emergency. Was it such an emergency that they had to beat the door down? They couldn't call you and be like, "Hey, can you come home and let us in to see if we can check for a leak?"
Well,
and they had to beat the door in right that moment.
I don't know where the communications breakdown existed. But yeah, they finally got a hold of our phone numbers from the management company about 2 hours after everything occurred. So like I said, I was living in Frederick. I was, closer to you, Steve, at the time. And I was trying to sell some audio equipment, and I probably would have come back sooner because I was waiting for someone. But yeah, I might have just missed it. This has happened before. The unit on the first floor has been cursed because about every 2 years they get water incursion. And I remember one time I was walking home, from the parking lot to my actual home, and I saw the fire department there with the ram, and I was like, "Well, hold on, I'm here."
Put that away. Just put that shit away. I will let you in. Yeah, I will remember this story the next time some Republican talks about how the best government is local government.
Yeah. What kills me is that, first of all, how common is copper piping? And copper piping, it's only been recently, like in the last maybe 20 years or so, that, PVC has taken over. And I know that because I'll tell you what, before that, when this house was built in 1965, the return pipes are all cast iron. I learned it the hard way because we had to dig up the kitchen and replace some very rotted cast iron piping. I can show you, I don't have them online, so I can't show you right now, but I have pics of a 3-inch run that went from my kitchen down to the what little basement I have. And it's just got this lovely little crease across the bottom, which is completely rotted out. And oh yeah, that was just 10 tons of fun. That was.
Well, I'm assuming that at least here in Montgomery County, Washington D.C., because WSSC is our local water company, the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, and it's D.C., Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and a few other places in the local area. And of course, it's like one of those multi-jurisdictional areas, so it has the same problems as our local metro does, and that no one wants to see them manage it. So yeah, like I said, this was, I would assume that just about every house in DC older than 1990 is copper, and that almost every construction here older than 1990 is copper as well. And of course, you know, they called an emergency plumber for the place below me, and you know, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, this happened in like early 2000, that all this they started finding all these pinhole leaks all over the county. So yeah, granted, it won't kill me like Flit does, but it's basically the same idea.
Yeah, but the further point is they're going to have to replumb the entire building ultimately.
Yeah, it's just inexcusable incompetence. Nobody, like, was it a secret that the pipes were all made out of copper? Did nobody find out about that until later? I mean,
I have no idea.
It just boggles my mind that you could be like, hey, 90% of our plumbing is copper piping, and we're going to put an additive in the water that for whatever else it does is going to corrode all the pipes.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Maybe they're like in league with the people that do the PVC piping, and they're just all like, yeah, we can make a lot of money on this.
It's a conspiracy.
I mean, crackpot theories.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Absolutely.
Is this the broken window idea that, you know, if you break everyone's pipes, you have to pay the glazier, the plumber, and also the people who do the drywall, because, you know, there's a lot of wall that has to come out.
It's a conspiracy of big plumbing. Big pipes. They concocted the whole thing. Oh man, I was talking, me and my wife were talking about conspiracy theories last night because we watched well, I'll explain the chain of events that led to this. We've been watching the CNN documentary series on the 60s on Netflix, and we watched the episode on the JFK assassination. And then after we watched that, I had to watch the JFK assassination episode of Quantum Leap, where he leaps into Lee Harvey Oswald. And so I watched that, and then we started talking about conspiracy theories. And so I'm like in a very conspiracy theory mindset right now. So you know, if you want to suggest that the pipes were intentionally sabotaged, you know, so that people by a shadowy cabal of plumbers and you know, home improvement contractors, like I'm open to that. I'm very open to that suggestion.
Conspiracy theory with exposed ass cracks.
Does anyone know where Bob Vila is? Can we find him?
Yeah, he's selling those basement conversion systems somewhere.
Did you check the 90s?
Yeah, you know, but you know, Lauren said how, you know, he knows about the evolution of you know, from cast iron pipes to PVC pipes because of his house. I know because I've been a viewer of This Old House for my entire life, and when you start watching it, like when I was a kid in the early 90s, it's all like everything's copper, and then gradually we're going to use these PVC pipes. This is the newest thing, you know, so it keeps you up to date.
Great New England accent.
Yeah, Roger. I can do. It's like you have to say certain words to sort of get into it. Like, I packed the car and have it yad. Roger.
Oh, good. I spent a year studying outside of Boston, and I tell you, I got so sick of the accent.
and
lovely people, I'm sure, but the accent just does my head.
Oh, they were lovely people, definitely.
Steve seems to be prepping for his next role on what is it, American Monsters.
Oh God, yeah. Can I do a Boston accent, Jason, please? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I'm a monster hunter from Boston.
Jason's just like, go
Oh my
ahead, I
God.
can't stop you.
Yeah, exactly. just give me an hour of material. I don't care. Just
Howdy.
We just have to figure out what the backstory for Monster Hunter from Boston is. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Joe. We were just talking about the well, first we were talking about conspiracy theories, but before that we were talking about the incompetence of local government.
Somewhere.
Because the best government is local government.
Oh yeah. Well, that's why I laugh whenever anarchists will say stuff like or Americans, and they're like, well, they want to basically have the federal government have no power because somehow magically if the state controls it, it'll somehow all the problem will go away. I'm like, Governor Christie, the douchebag in Florida, the douchebag in Wisconsin, Sam Brownback, Yeah.
Well,
so you want to replace what you view as one tyranny with 50 of them. Yeah.
well, and you know what? It doesn't get any worse when you get even more local, because I'm sure a lot of us have had this terrifying experience where you realize that like all the people who are working for the local volunteer fire department and rescue company are people you went to high school with.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, like I am doomed. If anything happens to me, I'm just not going to make it.
There are so many people on my hometown police department that I went to high school with that I'm like, no.
Speaking of one of the cops that was involved in that incident in Hagerstown with the 15-year-old girl last week, went to my high school.
Oh, bloody!
So yeah, I didn't know him personally, but he went to my high school.
Well,
so.
okay, even here, okay, in the town I live in now. Now, yeah, I'm liberal. I vote Democrat almost exclusively, and yet, there's an apparatus here run by the Democrats, and they're, they appear to be corrupt. I don't have any hard evidence, but I certainly have. There's an appearance of corruption. There's definitely a lot of cronyism, and trying to get some changes at the local level, and it just doesn't happen, to the point where I got involved with a local political group. It was kind of like a nonpartisan political group, and after just dealing with all that crap, I just gave up and said, "Fuck it." You know what? I'll just stay in my house and do my thing and pay my taxes and whatever. It's interesting too how like I've been in my house for over 10 years, and the street has gotten pockmarked from all the various storms and potholes, and all we ever got is shitty jobs. And certain people's streets are pristine all the time. I wonder how that happens.
That's interesting. I wish that our local Democrats around here were organized enough to be corrupt.
Actually, Steve, no, you don't, and I can say why. I can say why very simply. Richard J. Daley.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about corruption and machine politics? He didn't define the term, but he sure as hell exploited it.
Yeah.
Well, what about Huey Long? Although Huey Long was at least popular. He didn't he run the state house from jail at one point?
Pretty much. That's my understanding of it.
Well, and I know in my local district, the frustrating thing for me was at the congressional level, it's not so bad, but at the state level, there was an election, not the last election, but the election before that, where the Democrats didn't even run anybody, senator. And this is, the Democrats, not like the Constitution Party or the Libertarian Party, the other major party did not run a candidate at all. The Republican ran completely unopposed for state senate. It's like you couldn't find anybody. Well, you couldn't just put somebody's name on the ballot.
Well, although even here, like in my district, Jersey 6, we have Leonard Lance is our representative. The thing is, it's so gerrymandered. So you got like Elizabeth and Newark and Northern Union County with very liberal, very ethnically diverse populace, and then you've got like Western, like Warren County, everyone's white, and they're all conservative, and the whole deal. And but it's set up that basically Lance pretty much can't win. So they put up token candidates. I do wonder if the Democrats actually put up a decent candidate, if they might actually have a chance, but otherwise they generally just get crushed.
Yeah.
As it comes to Cleveland, I think the last Republican mayor we had here was George Voinovich. That's a while ago, and I can't even remember the last Republican to run for mayor after him. I mean, it's been solid blue ever since.
Well, I remember in New York City one election cycle where Ed Koch was on the ballot for both Democrat and Republican.
Yeah.
Well, that's
How
cute.
does that work?
Basically, he was
Everybody
super
loved him.
popular, and the Republicans decided that they liked him too, and they weren't going to waste. No one wanted to waste the political capital of losing, because that's the one thing people don't realize is this really weird thing that humans do. Like if you run and you lose and it's not close, then people just like, oh, that person's a loser. It doesn't matter that the odds are stacked against you and all this stuff. Or people don't look at the idea of, well, you can build up a constituency over time. It's like you're a loser and no one wants to deal with you. So no one wants to be the sacrificial lamb. And so that's why a lot of cases so actually thinking about it, if I wanted to run, I could probably be the candidate, because they'd be like, oh, good, we don't have to spend any money on this joker, and just
Somebody's going to actually do it.
yeah.
Sucker. Yeah. Ed Koch was so popular that I knew who he was when I was 9 years old. I mean, I would, because I'll tell you what I immediately thought of when you brought up Ed Koch was when I went to see Batman in 1989. The mayor of Gotham City in Batman was an Ed Koch lookalike. Like the mayor of Gotham was clearly patterned after Ed Koch. And my little 9-year-old self was sitting in the theater going, that looks like Ed Koch.
and the guy they had playing mayor of New York in Ghostbusters wasn't that much different.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, Lenny.
Yeah.
Lenny,
Yeah.
you
Lenny.
will save the lives of millions of registered voters. I love that line.
And see, that's one thing that I always get, this election cycle in particular, but any election cycle where people will complain about a particular politician here, whoever they are, and they'll say that, oh, well, they just do what the people, they're just pandering, just doing what people want them to do. Good.
Isn't that the job description?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want, because it's always like, to me, I generally find people that I don't like are the ones that are always like, well, I'm just going to do, hey, look, there's times you got to draw a line for sure. But I mean, you're there to represent the people, right? So, even if you differ on the implementation, I mean, as long as what the people want doesn't violate anybody's rights, okay, let's figure it out. Let's figure out a smart way to deal with what people want to do.
Joe, is there any chance you can forward that message to Donald Trump?
Well, he has a problem with smart.
Yeah. I don't think he'll listen.
He has a problem with a lot of things.
I also don't know if we would want Trump to do what his constituents want him to do.
Well, this is true.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they kind of had a freak out a few weeks ago when he softened for like a day on his immigration policy.
Well,
wait a minute.
That's the thing. As much as I think of George Carlin, it's very easy to, obviously Trump's a shithead and he does horrible things and says horrible things, but he couldn't possibly get anywhere if there weren't a lot of people who thought the same way.
Yeah.
That is unfortunately true.
Anybody here see the movie Bo James back when, with actually Bob Hope in the title role?
No.
Because one of the I don't remember a lot of the movie, but I remember the end. He was he's a mayor of New York, very controversial, apparently very corrupt, and he literally went, I guess, to Yankee Stadium for his basically say goodbye speech, and he says, maybe I'm full of it, but it took an awful lot of people like me to get me in office or something. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something like that. It was his way of politely saying "fuck you" to the rest of the world, and he walked off the field, and I think left the United States, never to return.
Yeah.
The other thing too, in that same regard. The way I feel about the Republicans, that a lot of Republicans that have spoken out against Trump, I mean, I'm glad they are, but I feel about them the same way I did about the pastors who criticized Harold Camping. Because a lot of them have said basically the same stuff, but they've dressed it up more nicely. They've wrapped more bullshit around it to try. You know, they put perfume on the turd, but it was
Well, they weren't as
turd.
specific.
Yeah, they didn't want to name a specific date.
Camping put a date on it.
Exactly.
The world's just going to end vaguely in the future.
I saw how many pastors I saw that were basically they were literally laughing at the guy. And they literally believed the exact same thing, except they didn't put a hard. In fact, so some of them actually went on. Well, it's going to be really soon, but I couldn't put a date on it. So you don't think it's next Thursday? You think it might be Saturday or Sunday? Okay, yeah. He's so much crazier than you are.
Just
that reminds me.
Honest about being crazy about it.
Yeah,
it reminds me of when I was I went to a Sunday school class a long time ago with a girl that I was dating, and I was like the only non-Christian in the room. This was before I was calling myself an atheist, but it was after I no longer considered myself a Christian. And I went to the Sunday school class because my girlfriend was religious and she went to church, and they were talking about Mormons, and it was a group of Christians talking about how ridiculous the beliefs of Mormons. And I was looking around going like, I'm the only one who gets it. You know, because it's like, those Mormons, they believe such ridiculous things. Now let's all pray to, you know,
this guy who walked on water. And
the guy who walked on water. And I mean, it's like, believe whatever you want.
Magical underwear will protect them. Here, eat the literal body of Christ.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when you're removed from all of it, it all seems ridiculous. It seems even more ridiculous when, you know, people in different churches are like, those guys are nuts, you know?
Well, I had a conversation with some I think it was creationists a while back, and they were lambasting me. I'm like, well, do you feel the same way about? They really hated atheists. I'm like, well, do you feel the same way about other religionists who aren't the same as you? Well, no. At least they believe something. I'm like, yeah, but they have the exact same opinion about what you believe that I do.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And you and I have the exact same opinion about what they believe. So how is my not believing any of it somehow rude or horrible or terrible? You think the same. In fact, you think worse about the other guy who believes some stuff. I just think he's wrong. You think he's, he's twisted from the devil or some crazy shit like that. I just think he's wrong.
Yeah, this is a point that I made with. I'm as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to be tabling over at Ingenuity Fest for the Northern Ohio Free Thought Society. Ta-da!
Hey.
And
nice.
One of the points that I made, and I this is not original with me at all, but I think it's a very powerful point, is regardless of your belief system, the majority of the world disagrees with you.
Yeah.
Because nobody holds a majority.
Even fellow members of your own faith disagree with you because, you know, like Christianity is just a huge umbrella under which there's
30,000 different variations on the same theme. Yeah.
Yeah. And most of the disagreements are over the most minor inconsequential stuff. Like, I mean, even the relatively major disagreements that have shaped the evolution of the church, like, you know, transubstantiation versus consubstantiation. I mean, like, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Sure.
And the funny thing is, that was my when I was still a believer. That was my exact attitude. I never understood the squabbles. It wasn't until I got older when I started, like, okay, because I was raised Catholic, and I was like, well, I don't understand why we fight with those guys because we think basically the same thing. And then I got older and actually learned more about some of the various, Protestant denominations. And I was like, oh, okay, I totally understand why there was wars.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, I mean, there are some significant theological differences. I mean, there are like, especially like, you know, who gets saved and who doesn't, and how that all works. But I mean, when you get right down to it, you know, nobody, and I've said this numerous times, like nobody can prove who's right and who's wrong, whether you believe it or not. I mean, my strong suspicion is you can't prove any of it because none of it's actually real. But, you know, whether you believe it or not, a Catholic can't present objective scientific proof that his version is right and, you know, the Methodist version is wrong. So just relax, just do whatever you do. You know, like, and let the other person do whatever he does, and just, you know, don't worry about it. Are they trying to stop you from doing it your way?
No, but they are insecure about it, and that's where all the arguments come from because they need constant reinforcement.
Right. Well, and that's what I say to people when they do the, well, what are you going to say if you if you die and you find out there is a God and blah blah blah. I'm like, well, here's the thing. When I believed in a God, I was taught, they all taught me that this was a God of love and compassion and all this kind of stuff. So I decided long before I gave up belief, I come to the conclusion, like Steve said, well, who cares? If you think that and I think this, well, we'll all find, if there is something to find out, we'll find it out in the end. And that the God you taught me about was loving and just and all that. So he's not going to punish me forever for inconsequential shit. I would think. So I'm not really worried about it because again, if the God I was taught to believe does exist, that God's not going to torture me forever. I don't think he exists, but he's not going to torture me forever for thinking he doesn't exist.
No, I think one of the main reasons why like the popular version of heaven is so different from the orthodox religious versions of heaven is that the more popular version is, well, good people go to heaven and bad people go to hell. And that gets, if you think about that in too much detail, it gets really complicated. But the general idea is a sound idea, right? The good people get rewarded, the bad people don't get rewarded. And when you study most religions, that's not how it works. Like, especially like in Christianity, God really doesn't care if you're a good person. God cares if you've said the right prayer and if you're on his team. Whole life being a murderer and a rapist and doing all these awful things, but if you find salvation before you die, then you're good. And I don't think, and the reason why that hasn't caught on with the popular imagination is because that's not fair. It's fair to say, well, it's fair to say, if you're a good person, if you try to help other people, if you're nice, if you're polite, if you're giving and charitable, and then if there's an afterlife, you should get the better end of it. That just makes sense. That just seems fair.
Well, and it's basically the rationalization that a lot of people do. I have a friend who's Catholic, and he's convinced that deep down I'm actually still a Catholic because I'm not a raving lunatic maniac. So I'm sorry. So because I have good values and morals, so he thinks down in there I'm still actually Catholic. He says this to me as if it's a compliment.
Because you're one of the good ones.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, because in his mind, and again, because it's a rationalization, people can't really, if you think of how hard, I mean, I would think, for any decent person to accept the idea that you could actually be you could live by all the other rules, like, being good to one another, live, do as you would have done to you and all this kind of stuff. And then, nope, you're still, you're done. You're baked. That's why I like 5-point Calvinists to me are the most ludicrous and probably the most dangerous, because their thing is like what you do, even what you believe is completely irrelevant. Before there was anybody, it was already decided where you were going to go.
Yeah. That's what drove me absolutely nuts when Steve was reviewing that one book. I can't even remember which one it was, but
it was probably Defense of the Faith.
Yes. Yeah, and just I mean, if it's all fixed, why are we even arguing?
Well, and here it goes even further than that too, because if you think about it, so there's literally nothing you can do to be saved. So there's no point in actually trying to convince anybody because it's already determined. And on top of that, here's the kicker though, is that basically 5-point Calvinists, they go by what's in Revelation. Well, according to Revelation, depending on how you interpret it, there's either 144,000 people saved or 288,000. It mentions 144,000 twice. It's not clear if it's the same group of 144,000 or two separate groups of. But even there, 288,000 people, which I'm sure way back to tribals sounded like a huge number.
Yeah, but it's less than 1/100 of 1% of the current population.
There's 4 million Calvinists now in the United States, which means they all have a golden ticket. Simple pigeonhole principle says they can't all have a golden ticket. Not counting the millions of 5-point Calvinists who've lived and died since the idea came up. So, but they all think they're the one with the golden ticket. But there's not enough golden tickets to go around. So why would you even proselytize? Because if I thought there was only 10 tickets to go around and there's 50 of us, I'm not telling anybody about this shit. I want to make sure I got one.
Yeah. I mean, the most you can do as it comes to the whole proselytizing thing is, I've got a golden ticket and you don't.
Well, and the monstrous side of it is basically what happens is it's led to, I think it's what's actually ruined the United States. It's basically the idea that because it's all decided ahead of time, that those that are favored by God will tend to do well because God has favored them. And by conversely, those that are doing poorly because they are not favored by God. So therefore, there's really no point in helping them because they're screwed. They're, God's, gave up on them before they started. So we don't need to help them. We don't, and then by means everything that's bad that happens to somebody, they deserve it. And if you listen to ultra-right people in the United States, when it comes to dealing with the prison population or the poor, it always comes down to this idea that whether or not, they don't deserve it. And this comes straight out of Calvinism.
Yeah.
This
and not only that,
like that. There's at least one, if not two, chick tracts that are like that exact same sort of plot. Oh yeah, poor people, screw them. We've got a ticket though.
Well, I mean, and the other side of what Joe was talking about is when something bad does happen to somebody, that mentality kicks in, and people start looking for the thing they did to deserve it, and whatever they find, even if it's the tiniest little infraction, that becomes the thing. And I think you see that reflected in, how people react to these instances of police brutality, where they'll say, oh, well, he shouldn't have run that red light, or he shouldn't have mouthed off to that cop, or he shouldn't have done blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no matter how minor the infraction, justification for whatever happened after that, even if what happened after that was completely out of proportion to the supposed original offense,
Well, that's easier than caring,
Yeah, that caring is hard.
I think one of the most ironic displays of how there are so many different denominations in this country is one of the entry points in the northwest side of the DC is called Chevy Chase Circle, and there are 4 churches positioned around that circle: a Baptist church, a Presbyterian church, a church called the Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament, and All Saints Church. 4 of them facing each other around this circle. How do people decide which one they're going to walk into?
Spin the bottle.
It gives new meaning to the word circle jerk.
Yeah.
Although I have to say, one of the nice things they do is during Easter weekend, all congregants of all 4 churches do a march around Chevy Chase Circle. So at least there's some unity there, but still, there's always that one little difference between each one of them that keeps them separated during the other 364 days of the year.
Yeah. I guess maybe you could put on a blindfold and have somebody spin you around like you were about to hit a pinata, and then whichever church you wind up facing, you just walk in that direction.
At least if you do that, you might end up in a bar instead. So
Something that Lauren said before, I think, is very important. When he said how a lot of people, they're insecure, and so that they feel the need, like they get constant reinforcement. And I think, at least with another religionist, it's like, well, okay, he may not believe what I believe, but he's open to the idea that I could be right, that there's some sort of supreme all father. Whereas those of us who don't believe, we're like, yeah, no, I'm not having any of it, and I think that's petrifying to them.
Well, Joe, here's something as it comes to that. There's something that I don't know whether this is original with me or not, but it seems like with them, their God is their air, and we don't breathe that air, and it's inconceivable to them that we don't breathe their air. We breathe air, and we're still living, we're still functioning, but it's such a fundamental commonality that we reject. And that's, I think, in a large portion, what they're reacting to.
So we're cover-based life forms, and they're Jesus-based life forms.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and if you don't believe in a God, if you start from the position of I don't believe in anything supernatural, then they don't have as much of an in when they want to proselytize you. Like I remember hearing stories. I used to watch a lot of TBN just voyeuristically. And I would watch Benny Hinn touch people, and they'd fall over, and I would get a kick out of it. And And they would have people on who had like led missions and stuff, and one of them was talking about how they'd been on this mission and they met this little village in Africa that hadn't been Christianized yet, and they found that the folks living in this village worshipped what they called an unknown god, like their beliefs included an unknown god. And so the Christians were like, "Oh, we know who the god is." And apparently the natives bought it, or at least they bought it while the Christians were there. And they said, "Yeah, we believe it. Great. Jesus is awesome. Now leave." And, but they took that little, opening of opportunity in the native belief. And they were like, "Oh yeah, that's our guy. So you should believe our guy, because we came to tell you all about him." And if you start out with, "Oh no, we don't believe in any gods. Like, I don't think it exists. I don't think it's even possible," then they can't start here. They have to start way back here. They have to convince you that this thing is possible to exist first, and then they can start you that their version is the right version.
I think that idea of the
so that's another good reason
was from the Book of Acts, where Paul was talking about the Greeks in their tomb of the unknown God.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think another thing too that I've heard from some people is that if I say, "Well, no, I don't believe any of it," and then they're like, "Oh, you think we're all stupid?" No, because I used to believe it, and I wasn't stupid. I was being uncritical.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Dillahunty says all the time he didn't gain IQ points when he became an atheist. He just was applying discriminatory and critical and skeptical thinking to a field where he hadn't before that time.
Right. And as we've seen in the YouTube atheist community, there's plenty of atheists that believe all sorts of horrible, heinous shit.
Yeah.
Stupid things.
Are there?
I
haven't heard about this. Are there really?
Steve, let us tell you about the MRAs.
Now, you may not have heard of them.
Well, again,
atheists wouldn't be involved in that sort of thing, would they?
My favorite will always
anecdote.
be the people who like make weekly videos to say how irrelevant Steve is. I mean, the irony.
Yeah, by the way, I want to thank you all for joining me, because as you know, my channel is dying. It's been dying for.
The problem is Steve never knows about them, because they only complain about how he blocks them. So he's blocked. They're out of his mind, out of sight.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've never seen people whine so much about not being able to talk to somebody they don't think is relevant.
That's it exactly.
Sometimes I want to speak all too.
But they spend a lot of time on
it. Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's one of the things that I think about. If say some dipshit makes a video about me and I'm getting like tons of notifications on Twitter and a bunch of comments on YouTube, the thing that makes me feel good and makes it easier to deal with is knowing that when I get done, blocking people or deleting comments, which is going to take me a couple of minutes, I'm going to go sit on the couch and play with my cat or hang out with my wife and watch a movie or whatever, and I'm going to forget all about it. Apparently, they're still going to be all wrapped up in it, and like just fuming and infuriated, and I'm going to be off doing, or I'm going to go on to my next video, which is going to have nothing to do with them and isn't even going to mention them, and
Yeah, and it's interesting because in some ways that parallels what we're looking at with the religious, because they're obsessing about something that is so important to them, they have to convince everybody else that it's true.
Yeah, and
meanwhile you're sitting on the couch watching whatever have you.
Yeah, or to take the metaphor to transfer it to society, like the people outside of their religion, or at least outside of their version of their religion, are just moving forward, are saying, you know what, maybe like with like gay rights or trans rights. I mean, there's a growing group of people who are like, you know what, let's just get on with it. Like, let's just get over it and just move forward, because it's going to happen eventually anyway. We're swimming against the current here. Let's just go ahead. And the group of people holding back, going, no, it's wrong, we have to stop it, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller every year.
Well, and I think that's the reason why I always admonish fellow liberals to keep pushing the penny, to use the British expression, because, as we get into like, well, sometimes we get into this all or nothing mentality. But the thing is that the reason why there's any right wing anything, because if you look at people surveys about issues, when you take away the liberal conservative labels, Republican, Democrat, all that, people's attitudes in the United States, despite how they vote, are generally about 75% toward left or center left ideals. But they don't vote that way because once you start slapping the labels on and you get into framing and all that kind of stuff, and then they come back the other way. And part of what hurts is that on the left, we have this tendency, that's our error is that, we get into, the perfect becomes the enemy of the good possible. Yeah. And so we get into like, it's all or nothing. And I'm going to pick up my tike and go home. And the proof of what I'm saying is look at Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz fucking despises Donald Trump. He hates him with a passion, but he's supporting him because he knows deep down if the Democrats win, he's not getting anything that he wants. So he sucked up his pride. And so, yes, he's kind of, he has no integrity, but he's also trying to win. Yeah. And in order to make change, you have to lead, and in order to lead, you have to win.
Do I have to look at Ted Cruz? He constantly looks like he just shat himself.
Yeah.
Nobody should ever have to look
even
at Ted
worse. Do you guys hear who just joined Trump's campaign? The Santorum.
Oh, boy. Well, that'll win. That'll win in Pennsylvania.
That frothy mixture is going to win for sure.
Yeah, come on. I guess the thinking is Trump's like, I got to win Pennsylvania. Who can help me win Pennsylvania? Santorum. Like, okay.
The guy who got ass stomped there the last time he was there.
Yeah. The guy that everybody just thinks is a kook, looking at the big picture, something that I think you're right, Joe. I think a lot of us, people who are more liberal, left-wing minded have a problem with that. I know I have had a problem with that myself. I try to look at the big picture, and I sort of try to advise people to do that same thing. I think you and I think pretty similarly on that. Yeah. But I remember about 6 years ago, when the same-sex marriage bill was up consideration in my state legislature, and everybody thought it was going to pass, and then it didn't pass, and I was like crestfallen. I was in the car when I heard it on the radio, and I was just like, I was devastated. I was so disappointed. And then the next year it passed. You know what I mean? Like it was awful for that particular moment, and for that year it was incredibly disappointing. And then the next year it passed, and then a few years after that, the Supreme Court ruled that it was legal everywhere, and it didn't matter anyway. Right. To get caught up in that moment when you think you're going to make this great progress and you don't.
Right. Well, and here's the other thing, Steve. Going along that same line. The two most important pieces of legislation that led to same-sex marriage being legal, and if I've mentioned this in your talk before, let me know and I won't go on about it. But
no, go for it.
Was actually DOMA and Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Right.
As terrible as they were, but they pushed the penny. They moved things. So Don't Ask, Don't Tell says, okay, we're not going to automatically kick you out. And of course, all the detractors are like, "Oh, the military is going to collapse, and men will be kissing each other in foxholes and all this ridiculous bullshit." And then none of that happened. And so then the idea of serving and people knowing about it wasn't so alien. And then they, like you said, they eventually more and more people went along with it, and fewer people objected to it. And what Don't Ask, Don't Tell did. I'm sorry, DOMA did, as shitty as a piece of legislation as it was. What it did do is it gave cover to those states that wanted to pass it, because there were a lot of states that wanted to do it and didn't, because what they were afraid of is passing it and then having the Supreme Court come in and say, no, it's nixed and gone, and they didn't want to have to rip people's marriages away. But what DOMA did, it said, okay, New Hampshire, I think they were one of the first states that did it, or Vermont. Hey, you can do it. You can do it. Have a blast. Do what you want. But Kansas doesn't have to pay attention to it. Okay. Well, then New Hampshire and Vermont and Massachusetts started doing it, and all the terrible predictions that the hate mongers had didn't happen. Society didn't collapse, and we didn't all turn gay, and all this ridiculous bullshit that they predict, because we know it was never going to happen.
Right.
And once reality smacks people in the face, or better, or rather yet, doesn't slap you in the face and slowly just kind of, like, hey, we're still here. The world's not on fire, and then all of a sudden the arguments fall flat, and then more and more states did it, and you think about it, the Supreme Court ruled the way it did because 31 states had already done it. So I would bet you if it was the other way around and there was only 19 states or maybe 15 or 12 states that had done it, they might have ruled differently. So,
Perhaps,
so a shitty piece of legislation it allowed the things that needed to happen. So it felt horrible, awful at the time with good reason, but it opened the door.
Yeah.
So,
the other thing that those did, I mean, DOMA and you got to really throw Prop 8 in along with it, although Prop 8 was down the street a little ways, is it created an irritant that got a reaction. And I think that is in a large portion why things moved the way they did, because it's worth keeping in mind. There were a bunch of votes, and in fact, I think there were, you mentioned the number 31, and I think it was around that number, of votes in state houses that voted down gay marriage before things started to break in the courts.
Yeah, for a long time, the momentum was in the opposite direction. I mean, it was one state after another was passing legislation to say, no, it's between a man and a woman, and that's it. It was a few years before the tide started to turn, But and even then, I mean,
always go backwards though.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see in about a month, won't we?
Well, I mean, like here, I live in Kentucky. Steve knows that.
Yeah.
And the ARC encounter, was just built up. Overconfidence on the right is such a thing. Like they were like, oh, we're going to have 10 million visitors, unique visitors, in the first couple of months. And that place is a barren wasteland.
Yeah.
I mean,
the atheists scared them all away.
You could look at sky shots of the ARC encounter, in the parking lot, and it's maybe a fourth full on a good day, on a weekend day. School started now. And
where are all the field trips?
Well, luckily though, I know this is going to sound crazy, but they tied the $18 million tax incentive to the attendance that ARC encounter gets.
Good.
Yeah. So, Kentucky taxpayers might only be on the foot for maybe $1 to $2 million. As opposed
That's
to
better than 18, I guess.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, granted, if a guy wants to take, $100 million and build his own ARC, that's fine. Just don't use mine to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I apparently the ARC was a flop from the very first day, wasn't it? Because I know a lot of like Aaron and a lot of the bigger atheists were there on the first day, and Aaron and I think David Silverman and a couple other people were like tweeting pictures of like the non-existent lines, like nobody was waiting.
Probably more atheists. The co-presidents here were sending me texts and putting pictures up in the Louisville Facebook group.
Bill, go ahead.
No, it was just they were just like sending me texts like, oh my. We could go through this thing and circle it 3 times and still not have to see another person.
Meanwhile, Bill Nye's going all the way through it saying, this is wrong, that's wrong, the other,
putting up
post-its everywhere. More wrong.
Well, I think it's funny that it seems like the attendance is probably a third atheist.
And that's the thing was like, Hemet was talking about it on his blog, is like the attendance is going to be highest in the first year for all the atheists who are going to attend just for the Schadenfreude.
And then they're not going to have
like the hardcore people who were just so excited. But then like next year, you'd be lucky if you get 100,000 people, in a year to go.
I was just down
to make a return visit.
Yeah, I was just down in Cincinnati the past weekend, and there was they actually had a digital billboard up showing off the Creation Museum. There's no mention of the ARC though.
Yeah, there's tons of Creation Museum billboards here in Louisville and Southern Indiana. That's all you see.
I think maybe that might be, hopefully that'll turn into an example of like the long-term strategy as well, because I think the creationism and Noah's Ark and that sort of thing, hopefully those will be the kind of stories that like once more people see them and you see it all laid out in front of you, it starts to dawn on you how ridiculous it is. And even if it doesn't like turn you into a non-believer, it at least makes you question like, okay, but like this didn't literally happen, though. I mean, you go from sort of the orthodox fundamentalist Christian to more of like a moderate liberal kind of Christian, where he's like, okay, this is just a story. This is just something that we're meant to take a lesson from, but we're not to believe that this literally happened, because clearly it didn't, because all they have to do is tell you the story and you can see how ridiculous it is.
Well,
explaining a joke.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's like explaining a joke. The more they lay it out and the more they make it detailed, the more crazy it looks. I remember that when I was leaving the faith. I started asking questions, and the more bizarre the answers got, the more I was like, okay, no.
It's actually almost the opposite of a joke, because the more they explain it, the funnier it gets.
And they say bad jokes aren't funny. Come on. Yeah, that's true.
The thing, what I always find funny, it's particularly the people who they'll insist on the one hand that it's 100% literally true. It's totally 100% literal, and then you point out just inconsistencies like bats or birds and stuff like that, and then they'll say, "Oh, you have to interpret." No, that's not what literally means. and and then they'll say, "Oh well," and then they'll accuse you of straw manning. Like, no. You can believe whatever you want, but you said it's literal, and literal means that there's no interpretation. It's as written, without any kind of or we have to understand anything. The words are the words. So
except for that,
it's just like people who are. They're anti-abortion on religious grounds, but they'll say all life is sacred, but then they're totally fine with the death penalty or war and stuff like that. And then I challenge them on that, and they'll come up with the excuses like, okay, well the criminal did something wrong, or the other side in the war is bad, blah blah blah. I'm like, again, that's fine, but then that means that some life isn't quite so sacred. And that's okay. You don't have to take the position that all life is sacred, but you did. You made the argument that all life was sacred, and then I came up with a bunch of examples that where you don't believe life is sacred. So which is, just be consistent. You think all life is sacred or not? And if you don't, that's fine. You don't have to, but then you can't use that as your argument as to why abortion is bad. You have to come up with something else, because you don't.
All life is sacred, but no health care.
Yeah, and this is coming from a God who's encouraging his soldiers to run their swords through pregnant women and spill the guts out and the kid out and the whole nine.
Crash the babies on the rocks and all that.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything wrong with what you've said so far, Lauren.
Say again.
I haven't heard anything wrong with what you've said so far.
I have my moments.
All tithing life is sacred.
There you go.
Well, and that at least would be a consistent answer if they actually gave that. And actually, it's funny. One friend of mine, he's a lawyer, and we got into this discussion, and I said, "Well, hey, Russ, you're a lawyer. I'm just using what you said." And then he actually backed up. He actually adjusted himself and said, "Okay, I won't use that argument anymore." He's like, "Okay, I think innocent life is sacred." Okay, that's a different argument.
That's a little better.
Yeah. What even is innocent life? I assume it just means babies. I mean, if everyone's a sinner,
don't kill babies. Everyone else is fair game.
And what about pets? My dog Molly has never killed anybody, so she's innocent.
Dogs.
She licks her butt.
Yeah, and for the guys who are so bent out of shape about quote preborn life end quote, I want to know why they aren't going as hard on the eggs that don't implant and the chimeras and the Siamese twins and all the lovely things that can happen before the kid shows up even. So,
well, and the funny thing is, it's not even that this thing. It's actually really only a phenomenon of the last 50 years, and it's not even biblical, because basically, if you talk to Orthodox Jews and people who are being honest about Orthodox Christianity, basically the principle, and I don't remember if there's a name for it, but basically the principle was that the soul is joined with the body when you are born.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in some interpretations, it's not even when you're born; it's not for a couple days after you're born. So abortion was never. It was basically a contrived issue in order to get political power.
Aaron Ross made that point several times in his recent videos too, and he's done it very well.
Yeah, it just depends on how.
Spirit means breath.
Yeah,
it depends on how on the
taking in the breath of life. Exactly.
It depends on how on the ball your soul enjoining angel is.
Yeah, because
some of them get it right there. Some of them are a little behind the 8 ball, you know.
Yeah, is this sort of like the stork who was behind schedule when he was supposed to deliver Dumbo to his mother at the beginning of the film, right?
Exactly. Sometimes they get a little backed up. They had a long weekend, or
Yeah.
Well, because Steve, I know you know Philip Rose, the liberal ogre.
Oh yeah.
Because that was his conversation we had a couple of years ago. Because he was raised Orthodox Jewish, or conservadox, and that was one thing that he had told me about. Like, and even today, that's why you don't see a lot of Jewish groups into the anti-abortion thing, because they're like, no, the soul, there's no soul, and so that doesn't count.
My question I kind of got on that is, so if, let's say a baby, because some people do think the baby has a soul at conception, it's at birth, and then there's some people think it's at birth. But if they have a soul at conception, and then, like, let's say 2 babies in the womb and one subsumes the other, so now it's just one kid. Is that murder, or does it have a double soul, or does it have twice the soul for half the flavor?
That's like Elisha, a double helping.
Yeah, I think Sam Harris brought that one up not that long ago, and he just had all sorts of fun with it.
Well, also, what then about fertilized eggs that don't implant? Should we have a funeral?
Exactly my point.
I'm sure Texas would like that.
Yeah, that one, miscarriages.
A funeral for every menstruation.
That'll be the law in Texas by the next election, I'm sure.
Well, considering the way they treat women in menstruation, they probably would want that.
Yeah. We're gonna put a stop to this. All this baby murder.
Well, what state was that I forget? Somewhere in the Midwest that was like, if a woman has a miscarriage, there has to be an inquest to make sure she didn't kill it somehow.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Tennessee,
I can't remember what state that was. But
there was actually something about a miscarriage requires a funeral, or postmortem or something like that. I saw that recently. I'm sort of going, what?
Don't like a quarter of all births just end in miscarriages. Some like large percentage.
Like that. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it was 80% of fertilized eggs don't implant or miscarry.
Exactly.
I think a lot of it is with a lot of religious folks. I think especially like the really conservative, more orthodox religious folks, they're taught to believe that the lines in life are really sharp and thin, and you can either be on one side or the other. And so life begins at this point, like whatever point you believe, whether it's conception or birth or whatever. And in reality, that's not the way it works. The lines are really fuzzy, where when does quote unquote human life begin? When does a fetus become a person? Well, we don't really know. You can't pinpoint it. It's just a process that happens. And religious folks are some religious folks are comfortable with that, but a lot of the more conservative religious folks are very uncomfortable with that notion that you can't just draw a line and say, okay, before this it's not a person, after this it definitely is a person. But that's just the way life works.
It all plays to their absolutism. They have to have an absolute answer. It's got to be this or that. It's got to be black or white. There's no gray.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like, to go with what Steve was saying, like, where's the line between when I go from being a child to being an adult?
Right.
It's kind of nebulous. Or from being an adult. So when do I go from being old to middle-aged, young to middle-aged to old? Is there a specific day? Mm-hmm. Not really. It's kind of like you said, a process. And I would argue not really the same for every single person.
Oh no, of course not. I mean, I know there were people I went to high school with who were adults in their senior year, and there are people who I went to high school with who still aren't adults now. I mean, and I might be one. Who knows? I mean, a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that notion of uncertainty and that notion of these, like, especially when you get into issues of personhood, where you realize how nebulous you as a person are. I mean, you as an individual personality, you're not this static, concrete, immovable thing. You're a collection of experiences, and and incredibly changeable and mutable, and that's really uncomfortable to me when I think about it. But I think that's the way it is.
I think that's another one of the reasons why they hate gay people and trans people, because the idea that, or that you're, like, well, no, the men have sex with women and women have sex with men, and or if you're born in this body, you're this and that, and even you think about people that are androgynous, who they have, for good or ill, with traits we have called masculine, traits we've called feminine, and they have some mixture thereof. And we have to beat that person up because they don't fit our model of the universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, again, it's playing to insecurity. They want something nice, hard, and fixed, and they're confronted with something that doesn't match their paradigm.
Yeah. That's why a lot of them are anti-science, because science is circumspect and nebulous and.
It can be precise in places, but you also have error bars in places. You have places, okay, plus or minus, thus and so, this is what we found out. But, you have to allow for an error range, because, there's no absolute reality, but there's a practical reality, and there's a range within that works, and there's a range outside of it that doesn't.
That's probably at least part of the reason why they put so much stock in saying, like, the Bible is like the ultimate word. It's the final everything.
Absolute.
Because the thing is, of course, if you look at it, it actually is completely arbitrary. It is God deciding what's good and evil. And that's completely arbitrary. It's just his choice of what's good and evil. But if you say that, they're like, no, that's just what's good and what's evil.
Yeah, and it gives them an excuse, because they can always shuffle the responsibility off to God.
And the thing is, too, is like, if God can change his mind, certainly, or else he's not all powerful. And if he can change his mind, then he's weak. And if he didn't decide what's good and evil, because that's just how the universe is, then he didn't make the choice, and there's something higher than him that decides what's good and evil. There's so many problems with the argument that it just drives me nuts when people make it.
Well, that's the thing. There's so much misunderstanding of what objective means. It's like, well, just the fact that we derive something doesn't make it not objective. What makes it objective is the fact that we come up with a standard and we apply those same standards to everyone in all situations. Yeah. And that may end up taking, two similar appearing things and coming up with different solutions or different answers to, to whether something's good or bad based on all the evidence, like I was trying to explain to somebody, they were arguing against the whole Black Lives Matter thing, and they were like, oh well, so cops should just get should just let everybody shoot them. I'm like, well, no, saying that I don't want cops to indiscriminately kill people that didn't deserve it is not saying I want them to never ever use force against someone who is actually posing a threat to them. That there's
why do you hate police?
And there may be some gray area where even good, honest people looking at all the facts will come up with, a different conclusion because it's nebulous. It's one of those things that could go either way. That's going to happen too.
I hate when people appeal to the gray area when the gray area isn't remotely what they're even arguing about. Mm-hmm. Like with the police brutality stuff, where people they'll be staunchly, unequivocally taking the side of the police and saying the police deserve respect and the police deserve support, and there is no problem with systemic racism and violence. It's just a few bad apples, and we should stop blaming the police for all this. And then you make an argument against them, and they start appealing to the gray area and say, what about the shootings where it's difficult to tell? Okay, but you weren't talking about that a minute ago. You were saying that we should support, you were saying that there's no problem. You weren't saying that it's tough to tell when there is a problem and when there isn't. You were saying we shouldn't worry about it. Right. And now you're talking about the gray area. That happens a lot in a lot of arguments.
It's like the walk back when you're trying to get religious people to, demonstrate that Jesus existed or something like that, and they start walking back from a specific God to a more deist position. It's not quite the same thing, but it's damn similar.
Yeah.
Gray area only goes one way.
Well, we have exhausted another hour, my friends, so I'm going to call this meeting to a close. I move to adjourn. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining me here on the air. I want to thank all of you for watching. I want to thank all of you who are patrons of mine for being patrons. It enables me to do what I do. I appreciate you all so much. Those of you who are here with me and those of you who are watching or will watch this later. If you are not a patron and you think I'm worth it and you can afford it, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives and you can become a patron. And one of the little bonuses you get is you get a chance to do this with me every month. So I think we had fun this month. I think we have fun pretty much every time we do this. So thanks everybody again for joining me and for watching, and we'll do this again in about a month. See ya.
Sure.